What is up, guys? Welcome back to Alex Academy, where in the next 3 videos I will guide you through a summary of Old World Encounters, arguably one of the greatest books ever written. First things first, let's talk about Jerry's thesis/point. His thesis is simple. Before modern day, conversions, mainly religious, but also cultural and social in general, weren't very detailed. Well, duh, right? They didn't have cool stuff like the internet where they could just plop archives like we do today. Instead, they had to pass it on, written, orally, or by other methods, such as artifacts, just to name a few. Fortunately for us humanoids, Jerry is able to classify these encounters in 3 categories, which we will discuss in detail later. His point is also simple. Conversions would not have been possible without syncretism, that is, the amalgamation or mixing of different cultures, etc. Syncretism is highly important as it's a main theme in world history. Okay, social versus voluntary conversion. A very simple concept. All we have to do is look at the English. Social is something that describes a person. Most commonly, we see in history that the thing that describes a person the most is their culture. So if someone changes their culture, that is social conversion. Now, voluntary means to do something without being forced to do it. So if I voluntarily convert, I convert without being forced to do it. So honestly, that's the difference. People try to make it harder than it sounds. Also, these two aren't mutually exclusive. For example, you could voluntarily undergo social conversion. In slide 2, we detailed Jerry's thesis and brought up 3 patterns listed here. So let's go over them real quick. First, voluntary association. Once again, just look at the English. Voluntary association is basically just being associated with a foreign culture without being forced. So I'm an immigrant, and bubble tea is my culture. But if I wanted to be more American, perhaps I can voluntarily associate by drinking Starbucks instead. 2. PES pressures. This stands for political, economic, social pressures. This is overall an important theme throughout world history. Make sure you know this. Throughout history, different groups pressured other groups to drop their culture. This was often done politically, say through government mandates, economic, say through taxes if you didn't convert, or socially, say through discrimination. And this was a real big deal. 3. Assimilation. So important. Assimilation is the process by which usually a minority group adopts the customs and is blended into the majority group. Generally, you see this in immigrants, where over a few generations, the immigrants' children act nothing like the originals. Okay, effects of cultural conversion, and there are many, so I'll just go over a few here. One of the biggest is diffusion, the process of ideas, beliefs, values, and text spreading to other areas. For you human geography geeks, me included, you know this is big. Well, this is basically world history encounters in a snap, diffusion. Encounters nearly always involve diffusion, cultural identities/traditions compared and challenged, and like I said in the last slide, sometimes groups assimilated to other groups. So right here is a map of diffusion around the world, and here is American assimilation, where it's like a melting pot where citizens of other countries come to America and they assimilate into American culture. Let's talk about the pre-modern power gang, or the merchants. These dudes, and sometimes women, were a big factor in the spread of some major religions today, especially Islam, for example. Merchants traded, and when they did, they helped diffuse the religion they practiced a lot of the time. 2 of them were Constantine, the leader of Byzantium, and Mansa Musa, the king of 14th century Mali. These dudes are super important, and you will learn more about them in AP World. Regardless, many of the times, these conversions could not have happened without syncretism, so that's something that's very important to remember. Silk Road conversions, so important. So last slide, we talk about merchants. Back in the old world, the Silk Road was the place to trade. It's like Amazon today. Merchants especially utilized this route for trade, but also sometimes for conversions. Since the Silk Road was so expansive as shown in this map, merchants from different regions were able to trade goods and religions. Actually, at its height, it even extended into Western Europe, which is not shown here. The alphabet. This one is quite interesting. So our English alphabet contains 26 letters, but actually it comes from Greek, which actually has 24. But Greece was influenced heavily by Phoenicia, a pretty small civilization in 1050 BC, 1,000 years before Jesus. Phoenicia had around 22 letters and is sampled below. What was revolutionary about Phoenicia's was that its alphabet was based on sounds, like A is pronounced A, versus traditional writing at the time, such as in China or Egypt, was mainly picture-based, such as pictograms. Instead of saying dog, you might draw something like a dog. Even today, Chinese characters, on the other hand, look a lot like simplified pictures. Buddhist origins. You can find it in the reading, but basically it's ancient northeastern India founded by Gautama, who was actually born a Hindu. Thus, you can find similarities between Hinduism and Buddhism. Now, I won't get too into detail because the story is quite long. So, Chinese resistance to Buddhism. Simply put, the Chinese didn't like Buddhism. For one, they already had their own religions, Confucianism and Taoism. Buddhism was Indian, so forcing it would be basically assimilation and social conversion like we discussed earlier. The Indian and Chinese traditions were fundamentally too different, so syncretism had to be used eventually. There goes that word again. But eventually, Buddhism was able to spread, mainly through missionaries known as monks. And this is a picture of a monk right here. At first, some Chinese did voluntarily convert because some of the morals were very similar to the Chinese traditions, but it was very limited. Eventually, syncretism, where Buddhism blended with native Confucianism and Taoism, really helped it take off in China. So, part 1 is officially complete. I'll leave you here for this one, but also make sure to check out part 2 at the end of the video. And as always, I hope you enjoy this, and thanks for watching.